Prince Harry's book, released by accident, leads to a cascade of the most shocking bombshells about him, his family, and relations with his brother. Prince Harry writes in graphic detail of how his brother, Prince William, wrestled him to the ground, of how he didn't want his father, now King Charles, to marry Camilla, his use of cocaine, and how he killed 25 Taliban militants. And yet, in a new clip ahead of his ITV interview, he defends his decision to speak so publicly.
Wouldn't your brother say to you, Harry, how could you do this to me? After everything we went through, wouldn't that be what he would say?
He'd probably say all sorts of different things.
We'll speak to our royal editor, Chris, who'll tell us about the global scale of this crisis, whether the royal family will react, and if Harry and William can ever heal the wounds revealed in this book. Also in News at 10 tonight. As the government announces measures to curb industrial action, tonight the Nurses' Union suggests they might lower their pay demands. Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer takes a leaf from the Brexit playbook, saying he has the answer to take back control for ordinary people. An historic ceremony in the Vatican not seen for 2 centuries as Pope Francis lays to rest his predecessor, and Julie was there to witness the heartfelt emotion.
Yeah, it's a significant moment.
And as the UK and much of Europe records a record warm year, is it too late to save our shrinking glaciers?
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omar.
Good evening. Publication of Prince Harry's much talked about and in some quarters much feared autobiography was still meant to be a few days away. Well, tonight the wait for what it contains is over. So too, it seems, is any imminent reconciliation with the royal family because of its blistering claims, in particular about his brother Prince William. In leaks of the book, which went on sale in Spain today by mistake, Harry details a series of truly shocking claims of how his brother, and next in line to the throne, William, knocked him to the ground in a row about Harry's wife, Meghan, of how William and Kate encouraged him to wear a Nazi uniform to a party. If that wasn't enough, there are revelations about drug taking, about how Prince Harry admits to killing dozens of Taliban in Afghanistan as an army helicopter pilot, about his father broke the news of his mother, Princess Diana's death, and so much more. But it is the claims about his own brother, Prince William, that are the most explosive and likely to leave the most lasting damage. 2 men who are not just brothers, but who are, given what they've both been through, brothers in arms, are now clearly brothers at war.
For years, many hoped there might be a path to reconciliation for these two, but today Harry confirms when it comes to his brother and his family, the gloves are off.
I don't know how staying silent is ever going to make things better.
Silence is clearly not the option Harry has chosen, and today more clips were released by ITV ahead of Harry's interview on Sunday. And we discover relations between father and son are now so bad, Harry will not commit to coming to the King's coronation, his own father's coronation, in May.
If you're invited to the coronation, will you come?
There's a lot that can happen between now and then. But, you know, the door is always open. The ball is in their court. There's a lot to be discussed, and I really hope that they are willing to sit down and talk about it.
But will anyone in his family want to sit down and talk about it, given the extent of private information Harry shared, including what he called a physical attack on him by his brother William? First revealed in a copy of the book obtained by The Guardian overnight, Harry writes, "He set down the water, called me another name, then came at me. It all happened so fast, so very fast. He grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace, and he knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, the pieces cutting into me." The scene of this alleged fight was the kitchen of their cottage in Kensington Palace, where Harry and Meghan used to live. A photo of the kitchen, complete with dog bowl, appeared in their Netflix series last year when they spoke about how small their home was.
But Nottingham Cottage was so small.
So I don't know who was there before. They must have been very short.
Another private detail exposed in the book was the moment King Charles spoke to his sons about their rift. It happened at the wake after the brothers returned from Prince Philip's funeral in 2021. "Please, boys, don't make my final years a misery," Charles said, according to Harry in his book. The book Spare was meant to be under wraps until its release on Tuesday, but in Spain today, En la Sombra, the Spanish version of Harry's book, translated as In the Shadow, went on sale 5 days early. It was put on and then, very quickly, taken off the shelves. But it didn't take long for English translations to appear, including Harry's claim about the Queen Consort Camilla. Harry writes that he and William urged their father not to marry Camilla. That will make for some awkward family meetings ahead.
Some people will say, you have railed against invasions of your privacy all your life. But the accusation will be, here are you invading the privacy of your most nearest and dearest without permission. That'll be the accusation.
That would be the accusation from the people that don't understand or don't want to believe that my family have been briefing the press.
Wouldn't your brother say to you, Harry, how could you do this to me? After everything we went through, wouldn't that be what he would say?
He'd probably say all sorts of different things.
But one thing we know Harry says about his brother, because he said so in this interview, is that William is his arch nemesis.
You refer to your brother as your beloved brother and arch nemesis.
There has always been this competition between us, weirdly. I think it really plays into, or is played by, the heir spare.
Quite what the king made of it all as he went about his business at Sandringham today, we don't know. There was, predictably, no response from Buckingham Palace about the book or any of Harry's claims.
Do you still believe in the monarchy?
Yes.
Do you believe you'll play a part in its future?
I don't know.
It's hard to see how Harry and his family reconcile after this.
Chris, there are a huge amount of excerpts from this book coming thick and fast after its release today, and a lot of the headlines will be about the damaging implications within the royal family. But there are also a lot of details about him and his personal life, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, a huge number of details. And I think, Rageh, because of the interviews that Harry's done, and because a copy of the book found its way to The Guardian overnight, and then we had it going on sale in Spain by mistake today, I kind of think this evening we've probably got everything that's in that book, unless there's a particular passage in Spanish that nobody could translate. And apart from everything I've just told you about in my report there, we've got Harry's admission that he took cocaine. They've got details of how he lost his virginity. I'll spare you that detail. But also, you know, comments about how this rivalry with his brother goes back to the very sort of early days when William always got given a bigger bed and a bigger bedroom than he had as well. There's the claim that William and Kate told him to wear that Nazi uniform, if you remember that story from a few years ago, and how his father told him his mother had died. And then there have been lots of questions today about the wisdom by Harry of saying that I killed 25 people when I was flying Apache helicopters in Afghanistan. I mean, I'm not a former military person, but I think those who I know have been in the military question why he would do that, why you would keep a tally. But as I say, that's a pretty long list. And I think we might tonight have the entirety of this book.
And then comes the question of what Buckingham Palace does.
Yeah.
In reaction,
nothing,
or whether it will.
Yeah. They said nothing about Netflix, and they've said nothing about everything that's been in this book. You know, I wonder whether at one point they might find that small phrase like the Queen used after the Oprah Winfrey interview, recollections may vary. But as we are tonight, nothing from Kensington Palace, nothing from Buckingham Palace. And I think they may choose just to take the higher ground and say to Harry, OK, I know you've said to Tom Bradby you might not come to the coronation, but actually here's your invitation and you're a welcome member of family, so come if you want.
And yet this is not just a story within the United Kingdom. This is a global story, isn't it? And this is only just beginning today, over the next 4, 5, 6 days, as you well know.
There's more to come. And actually, you know, this was kind of leading bulletins in America and in Australia and elsewhere today. Look, you've got ITV's interview on Sunday night with Tom.
Yep.
Following that, you've got 60 Minutes on CBS. Following that, you've got GMA, Good Morning America, where Harry's done an interview for them. And then we learned tonight he's done The Late Show on CBS. There's lots more interviews to come before the book's official release on Tuesday. But as I say, I think we probably know now almost everything that's in it.
And yet it will continue into middle of next week.
Let's see.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, now to other news. And right in the middle of a week of rail strikes, the government has confirmed it is bringing forward plans to limit the impact of future industrial action by public service unions. Minimum staffing levels will be set for health, education, fire, rail and nuclear power. If they are not met, employers will be able to sue unions or sack workers. Unions are, to put it mildly, simply furious.
As rail workers walked out again today, the government chose its moment to strike back. A new law designed to peel off the picketers and force public services to keep moving.
I think they should. I'm sick to death of all the strikes everywhere for everything.
There has to be some sort of service. Like today, it's been really, really difficult.
You've got to be nervous about suppressing the working man. He's got his right to remove labour.
Well, yeah, you need to be able to cause disruption. Like, you know, people are striking for a reason, right?
But the new law will require a minimum service to continue during strikes in the fire, ambulance and rail sectors, and could be extended to the rest of the health service, transport, education, the nuclear industry and border security. Employers would be able to sue unions who breach the law, and employees could be sacked for striking.
There has to be a minimum safety level that people can expect even on strike days, particularly in areas like healthcare, making sure that an ambulance can turn up, for example. That's very patchwork at the moment. Other modern European economies all have minimum safety levels.
What do we want?
But the law won't end the current strikes in any sector, and unions say it'll only extend future ones.
But quite simply, right, any attempt to put minimum service levels in will only exacerbate and add to the strife and add to probably more days of strike action to make up for the minimum service levels. It doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Polling suggests that support for strikes varies by sector. Much lower support for rail workers, much higher support for nurses and ambulance staff. The public is not unified, and both main parties see votes in it.
Here's Starmer.
The Labour leader, increasingly trying to present himself as Prime Minister in waiting, today promised to reverse any change in the law.
You know, we'll look at what they bring forward, but if it's further restrictions, then we will repeal it. And the reason for that is I do not think that legislation is the way that you bring an end to industrial disputes.
For now, expect the protracted strikes to lead to protracted politics in the coming months. Picket lines are a dividing line for the next election. Paul Brandt, News at 10.
Well, this evening there's been a development in the strike by nurses who are members of the union, the Royal College of Nursing. They were demanding a 19% pay rise, but now appear willing to accept 10%, the current rate of inflation. Emily is here. Emily, this is obviously a significant concession, if you want to call it that. Is it going to be enough to sort of call off the strike by the nurses?
I'm not sure. I think it's a significant move. I really do. Will it end the deadlock? I think the short answer to that is probably no, not yet. The government has already come out tonight to say that their position hasn't changed, and their position always was we will not negotiate pay. The pay settlement of just over 4% last year stands. That said, Pat Cullen, who has done this podcast with Times Radio, I think has really thrown down the gauntlet here. She is challenging the government to come to the table and talk, and the very idea that she has said nurses could accept something in the region of around 10% and not the 19% that they had been fighting for is going to be really difficult for the government to ignore. She is saying there is a chink of light here. Come to the table and talk to us. And given the huge public support that nurses have, that is really, I think, going to put the government in a tricky position. Not only has the Scottish government been willing to negotiate, but now the nurses in England are willing to make concessions. So I do wonder how long the government can continue with this line that it isn't affordable, that 19% isn't affordable when the nurses have said they would accept less. So the next planned strike, the next nurses' planned strikes are in a couple of weeks' time, the 18th, 19th of January. That is enough time to talk. The government has said they will talk about pay for the settlement this year. Nurses are saying they will concede on the pay settlement for last year. So potentially there's a deal to be done here.
Deal to be done. Thank you very much, Emily. We'll see. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who we heard a moment ago talking about the government's anti-strike legislation, devoted his New Year speech to how Labour would govern Britain differently, he said, with a nod to the Take Back Control message of the Brexit campaign. He talked of Westminster giving away power to local communities and end what he called the Conservatives' sticking plaster government.
Ahead in the polls and fired up for the new year. And seemingly so confident, Sir Keir Starmer has even adopted the slogan of his former opponents.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for us to take back control.
Remember this? Sir Keir wants to use Brexit campaign language for his own levelling up plans.
So we will embrace the Take Back Control message, but we'll turn it from a slogan into a solution, from a catchphrase into change. We will spread control out of Westminster.
But he's still trying to shake off any lingering concerns and said Labour wouldn't get out its big government chequebook.
Of course investment is required. I can see the damage the Tories have done to our public services as plainly as anyone else. But we won't be able to spend our way out of their mess. It's not as simple as that.
That reluctance to spend means Sir Keir can't, or won't, say how he would fix immediate crises, like negotiating with striking nurses.
Well, they haven't been in the room talking to the nurses, and that's why we've got a strike.
But they are talking. How would your talks be any different to that of the government?
The government, you have to go in the room, you have to look at the issues and compromise on both sides.
Would you compromise on pay?
Look, you've got to get in the room and negotiate. It's not just about pay, because sitting behind this is the workforce crisis.
But it sounds like that you might be willing to open this big government chequebook that you said you're not going to do.
No, I'd get in the room and talk to the nurses. It's not just about pay, it's also about the workload.
It's quite easy to be in opposition when the party in government has had 3 prime ministers in the space of a year, but lots of members of the public still don't understand what Labour are actually for.
I think the biggest change we need to bring about is to make our economy work for working people across the whole of the country. And what I want is not just to grow our economy, but to grow it in every part of the United Kingdom.
Keir Starmer knows an election is coming, and as it approaches, demand for more details, not just ambitions, will only grow. Harry Horton, News at 10.
Pope Benedict was laid to rest today in a Vatican crypt after the kind of funeral service he had wanted and that his position in the church dictated. In other words, it was both simple and heavy with tradition. It was also historic because the Pope, his successor, Francis, presided over the funeral of another. Tens of thousands of Roman Catholics were also in St. Peter's Square to bear witness. Julie was amongst them.
The great Basilica of St. Peter's, a shroud of mist for a morning farewell. Through the streets of Rome they had come, priests and nuns, the faithful drawn from around the world into the arms of the church. A stark first sight of the late Pope's coffin. A simple casket of cypress wood, laid on the ground in papal tradition, the Gospels open on top. From George Ganswein, the private secretary who'd served him for over 30 years, a kiss. Then Pope Francis, his own elderly frailties in view, was assisted to the altar, robed in funeral red, the image for the history books as he prepared to lay his predecessor to rest. At Pope Benedict's request, this was a simple funeral. Very few world figures were here, only official delegations from Germany and Italy. Some surprised too that Pope Francis only mentioned Benedict by name at the end of his sermon.
Benedetto, fedele amico dello sposo.
He called Benedict a faithful friend. May your joy be complete as you hear God's voice now and forever, he said. At the conclusion of the Mass, a moment of personal farewell to the man whose resignation had brought him to leadership. Catholics here from around the world were deeply touched.
Pope Benedict was very loved, and he was a very spiritual man, and to be able to experience this is just, the singing, you felt like it was from the heavens.
It's like heartwarming. It's heartwarming. And I had to be here.
It was a great moment, a spiritual moment.
He's a very holy man. I am expecting to see him as a saint very soon.
The leader of Catholics in England and Wales had been alongside the altar.
You're very moved, Cardinal.
Yeah, it's a significant moment, I think, and it does have that, as I say, that deep sense of faith and trust that no matter what we go through, here is this promise that there is a fullness of life awaiting us. And I think that's something everybody needs to hear, because there are so many difficulties in life, there are so many problems that everybody faces, and the burden of weakness and sickness. But there is a promise, and we should never lose sight of it. Yeah.
Amongst his closest circle, inside St. Peter's, the tenderest of goodbyes. This was a controversial, historic papacy, a moment of departure for the Church, but in the silent crypt, for those who loved him, sorrow and thanks. Julie Etchingham, News at 10, Vatican City.
Well, for the first time since he ordered troops to invade Ukraine nearly 11 long and bitter months ago, Russia's President Putin has suggested a ceasefire. He wants it to coincide with Christmas in the Orthodox Church from noon tomorrow until the end of the day on Saturday. Well, tonight, President Zelensky told him what to do with this ceasefire, saying Russia will just use it to resupply ammunition and mobilize more troops.
The cameras were sent in by Kremlin officials to capture a telephone exchange between Vladimir Putin and a family of his thankful citizens.
Да, привет. Это Владимир Владимирович. Как твое путешествие по Москве?
Propaganda for the evening news on Russian TV tonight.
С Новым годом тебя, с наступившим и с приближающимся Рождеством Христовым.
The president smiled at times as he spoke to a boy who was said to have just had his wish fulfilled, a visit to the Academy for Russian Armed Forces. But was this Putin's only piece of wartime theatre, timed to mark the Orthodox Christmas this week? As intense fighting and shelling has continued in the south and the east of Ukraine, there's been no evidence of any intention to cease hostilities. And yet this afternoon, a statement from Putin's office read, "I instruct the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation to introduce a ceasefire regime along the entire line of contact of the parties in Ukraine from midday on January the 6th to midnight on January the 7th. A truce presented as an act of festive goodwill, but it's Russia which needs it the most to regroup and resupply." Earlier, the Turkish president said he had urged his Russian counterpart to declare a ceasefire. But Ukraine rejected the proposal tonight. A presidential advisor tweeting that Russians must leave the occupied territories first. Only then will it have a temporary truce.
Now they want to use Christmas as a cover to at least briefly stop the advance of our guys in Donbass and bring equipment, ammunition, and mobilized men closer to our positions. What will this bring? Just another increase in the death toll.
What briefly looked like a breakthrough this afternoon has tonight become a reminder of how difficult things will be to achieve peace. Because proposing a ceasefire is one thing, agreeing to one quite another. Rohit Katru, News at 10, Kyiv.
Back here, and the number of people ending up in hospital from flu remains at its highest level for a decade, with cases of that and coronavirus rising in the run-up to Christmas. Admissions did come down slightly last week, but most probably because of New Year holiday interruptions to compiling the figures. The pressure on beds, however, remains high. The boss of Amazon suggested the online retailer had overhired in the past and was now having to make thousands of worldwide job cuts because of the uncertain economy. 18,000 of the global workforce of 1.5 million will go in the largest layoff in Amazon's history. Chief Executive Andy Jassy didn't say how many in the UK would be affected, but bricks and mortar stores like Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go will be hit, along with warehouse and office staff. And Emma Raducanu's build-up to the Australian Open in 10 days' time has not gone to plan. She left the court at a tournament in New Zealand in tears after going over on her ankle and having to retire from her second round game. She blamed the indoor court after rain had forced the match from outside to inside. She'd won the first set easily, but started to struggle after the injury. Now, it may not be a total surprise after the summer we've had, but last year was the UK's hottest on record. The country saw its provisional annual average temperature pass 10 degrees Celsius for the first time, the highest since records began in 1884, and breaking the previous record, 9.88 degrees in 2014. The UK, however, is not alone, with records being broken across Europe. Last year, the average in France was above 14 Celsius and in Switzerland above 7. The impact is being seen everywhere. If temperatures keep rising, 2/3 of the world's glaciers will melt out of existence by the end of the century. Many will disappear regardless of efforts to reverse climate change, but experts say some can be saved.
Water storage in the Alps doesn't come much bigger than this. The Mer de Glace, or Sea of Ice glacier, is the largest in France, and due to climate change, it's shrinking fast. A lonely sign on the tourist route down shows where this glacier was in 1985. 38 years later, it's now 150 metres lower.
This glacier, like all the glaciers in Alps, decrease very fast since the last 30 years because the summer is very hot.
Luc Moreau is a glaciologist. There was a time in the 70s when he witnessed glaciers growing, but the melt has accelerated since then. His measurements last year beat all records.
We are at 1,600 meters high. So here the glacier lost 16 meters of ice this summer.
Alone, in one summer?
In one summer, yes. It's the record. Normally the average here is between 8 and 12 meters.
Luke believes humanity is responsible for the melting landscape, and preventing a total thaw is also down to us.
If we are good activities, clean energy, etc., we can preserve perhaps 30–40% of the glacier today.
These towering mountains will, whatever the climate, always grab our attention. And here it's even possible to get inside the ice. Tourists are coming here for two reasons. One, of course, to experience what it's like to be inside a glacier. But secondly, they're coming and learning about climate change. This is a place where you can physically touch it, and it leaves a mark. A stark reminder to visitors of our changing world.
We don't seem to be learning from it. As much as we try and as much as we do on a bigger scale, this is the reality, and it is sad.
We've managed to make such a significant change on something that probably hasn't changed for centuries before this, in such a short time. We're obviously doing something wrong and we really need to fix it.
This glacier has scarred the valley, and it's still carving into it. What we are witnessing is change, and it's happening at record speed. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10 in the French Alps.
Back now to our top story and the searing claims made by Prince Harry in his autobiography. For reasons that aren't clear, copies appeared on the shelves of Spanish bookshops today. There will no doubt be an inquisition into how on earth that happened after months of intense security. Despite that, its contents span tomorrow's front pages. The Guardian says Harry's claims have prompted a crisis for the royal family. The Express believes there can be no reconciliation between the brothers. and the Eye describes the crisis as the worst for the monarchy for 30 years. What happened in Harry's kitchen in Nottingham Cottage on the grounds of Kensington Palace may remain a wedge between the royal brothers for the rest of their lives. William has, of course, remained silent today, but his distress at what Harry has written seems insurmountable tonight. And that's it. Good night from me and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching.